Let's be honest, medieval women probably wouldn't like you, and to be fair, neither would most medieval people. Why is that? Were they really so different from us? In this video, we'll dive deep into the world of chivalry, religion, and morality to explore the medieval mindset, especially that of its women. By the end, you'll understand exactly why a 15th century woman might see you as, well, a bit of an annoyance. So, picture this. You've time-traveled back to the 15th century. You're trying to fit in, but you keep getting strange looks. The reason might be simpler than you think. Your emotions are all wrong. The historian Johann Huizinga, in his book, The Waning of the Middle Ages, described medieval society as one of emotional extremes. Everything was louder, more colorful, and more intense than it is today. People lived their feelings out loud. Think of public processions where entire towns would march barefoot, weeping openly for days on end to mourn a beloved leader, or pray for an end to a plague. This wasn't just for show, it was a deeply felt communal experience. In church, it was common for priests and their congregations to be so overwhelmed by the passion of a sermon that they burst into tears together. This public display of emotion wasn't seen as weakness, it was a sign of a sincere and pious heart. And in this intensely emotional world, women often held a special kind of spiritual power. Figures like Joan of Arc, who led armies inspired by divine visions, or Marjorie Kempe, a mystic who was famous for her loud, uncontrollable fits of weeping in public, were seen as religious exemplars. Their extreme emotional expression was proof of their deep connection to God. For them, faith wasn't a quiet, private affair. It was a passionate, all-consuming fire. So, your modern-day emotional restraint? That tendency to keep a stiff upper lip and say, "I'm fine," when you're not? To a medieval person, it would look cold, insincere, and maybe even a little suspicious. This brings us to the immense role of religion. In a patriarchal society where women had limited legal and political power, Catholicism provided an alternative route to authority and respect. A woman's piety and moral standing gave her a voice that could command attention. Her devotion was her credibility. In this context, your modern, laid-back or spiritual but not religious attitude would be completely baffling. To them, being casual about the most important thing in the universe, your eternal soul and your relationship with God, would seem not just odd, but deeply untrustworthy. And it wasn't just faith that demanded this level of intensity. Love was expected to be just as passionate, public, and performative. The idea of a quiet, private romance was almost unheard of among the nobility. Love was a grand drama played out for all to see. Think of the epic poems and chivalric romances that were the blockbusters of their day. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were guidebooks for how to behave. This leads us straight into the world of chivalry and courtly love. Chivalry wasn't just about opening doors or fighting dragons. It was a complex code of moral performance, and a huge part of that code was a knight's public devotion to a lady. This wasn't just a fantasy. We have records of powerful nobles like Duke Philip the Bold of Burgundy, who made it a daily ritual to have heroic tales of chivalry read aloud to him. These stories shaped his worldview and the expectations of his court. The most famous example from literature is Lancelot, the greatest knight of the Round Table. In one story, to prove his absolute devotion to Queen Guinevere, he willingly endures public humiliation by riding in a cart meant for condemned criminals. For him and for the audience reading the story, this wasn't a moment of weakness. It was the ultimate proof of his loyalty, showing that his love for her was more important than his own honor and reputation. Medieval women, raised on these stories, expected grand gestures. They expected men to prove their love through dramatic, self-sacrificing, and very public acts. Your modern idea of a romantic evening, maybe dinner and a movie, would seem laughably underwhelming. Where's the passion? Where's the public declaration? Where's the willingness to humiliate yourself for love? Of course, not everyone blindly accepted these ideals. The brilliant writer Christine de Pizan, one of the first professional female authors in Europe, famously challenged the male-centered narratives of romance literature. She argued for a more balanced view of love and criticized stories that portrayed women as mere objects of conquest. But even in her critique, she was engaging with these powerful cultural norms, not ignoring them. She understood that in her world, love and morality were public performances, and this performance extended into every corner of daily life. Religion wasn't something you just did on Sunday. It was the very fabric of society, for peasants and princes alike. The tolling of church bells marked the hours of the day, and saints' days filled the calendar. In this world, morality was a communal affair. Your personal reputation was everything, and it was constantly being judged by your neighbors. While men were often seen as the leaders in society, women were frequently positioned as its moral conscience, expected to uphold the highest standards of piety and behavior. So, imagine you, a modern person, dropped into this environment. Casually swearing, telling a slightly off-color joke, or deciding to skip your evening prayers would be more than just a personal choice. It would be a public scandal, a sign of your poor character that could damage your standing in the entire community. The modern idea that what I do in private is my own business simply did not exist. Everyone's business was the community's business, because one person's sin could, in their view, bring divine wrath upon everyone. Now, it would be easy to paint the Middle Ages with a single black and white brush, but the reality was far more complex and contradictory. People were just as human and messy as we are today. Take Anne of Burgundy, the Duchess of Bedford. She was known for commissioning beautiful and deeply pious religious manuscripts showing her devotion and faith. At the same time, records show she also owned a collection of racy stories and even had an affair. Was she a saint or a sinner? In the medieval view, she was both. Life was a constant struggle between sin and salvation. People could act inconsistently, holding deep religious beliefs while simultaneously giving in to very human temptations. The key is that they operated within a shared cultural framework of values. They might fail to live up to the ideals of piety and chivalry, but they still believed in those ideals. So, would a medieval woman actually hate you? Probably not. Hate is a strong word, but she wouldn't understand you. Your emotional restraint would look like apathy. Your casual approach to faith and love would seem insincere. Your focus on individuality over community would feel alien and selfish. The cultural gap would be immense. You'd be an outcast not because you're a bad person, but because you're playing by a completely different set of rules. What can we take away from all this? Perhaps it's a reminder to embrace a little more sincerity, passion, and conviction in our own lives. Maybe our modern world, with all its irony and detachment, could learn something from the intense, all-in emotional world of our ancestors. The past isn't really gone. It's just waiting for us to rediscover it, to understand its people not as caricatures, but as complex humans living in a world very different from our own. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey back in time interesting, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more explorations into history. See you next time.